Having dominated an entire world, twisting it to his foul machinations, with nothing more than a show of his own immense power, the Moonlord would continue on to take for himself the planets and species he deemed worthy to be part of his great celestial army. Unlike those that had come before, not all creatures he desired to subjugate would be placated so easily. Some may even put up something of a fight, not through a show of force, but through sheer, immeasurable numbers. Gods had begun. Humanity had all players deep and challenging, with different is less likely to get me horribly Deep in an unexplored region of space, racked with constant atmospheric storms, lies a ringed planet that none should dare venture to, even if they could. Unlike the many other worlds in the cosmos, this one stands inert, unchanging throughout the eons, having long ago been conquered by the world's most superior race. Across its surface grows a thick, mucus-like creep that hardens into a dense carapace of sorts, which protects what dwell below from the hostile toxins in the air. Toxins formed by the very creatures which the carapace protects, pumped into the atmosphere through tubes resembling living brachia. This world is far from alive, having been choked to death by the parasites that burrow into and grow throughout it. The single species that still exists on this dead rock are not known to have a name. Any who venture close enough to conduct a taxonomic analysis would surely die. Even worse, they may for a time survive. Beneath the carapace exists an unending network of tunnels and chambers filled to the brim with nightmarish, scuttling creatures, dubbed to be like hornets by a single garbled and doomed transmission from the world. Here these alien workers tend to the multi-eyed pustule-like larvae of their species. It is unknown for sure how the creatures obtain enough nutrients to feed the vast brood of young, but it is known that regardless of how many of these young exist, more will be continually birthed by the final and most vital part of the aliens' hierarchy, what can only be described as the Queen. Contrary to what outsiders may believe though, there is not just a single alien queen. At one point in time there may have been a single matriarch, but in order for the hive to grow to the vast size it has, there has to be many more than one singular queen. In fact there may be thousands, possibly tens of thousands, each with direct control over their own brood, which in turn interacts and integrates with others until there is no longer any definition between them, and the whole hive moves as one tremendous entity. Those who have heard tales of this terrifying world consider that its ecosystem may exist in a perpetual cycle, that the dead, barren world seen today is merely a dormant phase, and that in the distant past life may have grown across the solid carapace as if it were bedrock, evolution giving rise to brand new creatures that the parasitic aliens would then go on to harvest, infesting their bodies to incubate their young, feeding on their flesh to maintain them, and at last coating the surface in another layer of that dense carapace, erasing all evidence that the planet's surface could maintain any form of life. Whether or not this was the case in the past, it is unlikely anything could ever exist again in that hostile atmosphere. It may be that the parasite's dormant phase would now go on to last an eternity. At least it would have if not for the Moonlord. He could offer the species the one thing they could possibly desire most: space to expand. Under the Moonlord they could be transported off-world to infest other planets, entire solar systems, maybe even galaxies. The Moonlord would not care if that happened so long as they followed his instruction. It was to his surprise then that when he descended into the toxic air, he was greeted only with the awakening of a ravenous horde. They could not see beyond their own instinctual desire, and rather than view this titan from the stars as their ticket to galactic infestation, they saw him only as a suitable host for millions of their spawn. It was with some degree of disappointment then that the Moonlord was forced to exterminate billions of the alien parasites in an attempt to impose his will. But still they came, trillions upon trillions, an unending swarm that would only be stemmed once they were all dead. Rather than continuing to annihilate his prize in the slim hopes they would submit, the Moonlord pulled back and observed the crawling surface of the desolate world. Workers protecting larvae, queens commanding workers, and yet that many queens could not possibly coordinate their efforts alone. Regardless of their obvious superiority, there had to be something else. And so it was. Deep within the layered carapace that had become the planet's new crust, in the most well-guarded chamber of the hive, dwelt a massive, ancient being, the singular point through which all of the Queen's commands were processed. the alien Empress. Once the Moon Lord realised this, the resistance he encountered was trivial. He tore away at the rock-hard crust, burrowing directly to the Empress's chamber, where, surprisingly enough, he would not immediately kill her. No, he needed her control of the hive. Instead, he abducted her, leaving the rest of the planet to fall into anarchy for a time, and experimented on her, dissecting her body and brain until he found her secret. As it transpired, it would not be that simple though, for she was no appointed leader, but the first of the queens, the first to birth her kind, and over eons garner ultimate control over the planet. Discovering this, the Moon Lord resolved to a risky course of action. He would consume the Empress whole, and attempt to merge her with his essence. Over her existence, she had grown strong though, and there was a slight but very real risk that she would be the one who would gain control over the Moon Lord, and even if he did take control, then part of her would live on within him, whispering inside his mind forevermore. But the deed had been done, and for the moment the Eldritch God maintained control, managing to quell the Horde and order them into a form of his liking. Without taking a moment to attempt consolidation of power within his own mind, the Moon Lord set to altering the species with his own DNA, as he had with the solar race. The changes twisted the form of some of the queens, vastly expanding their intelligence, making them commanders and tacticians of sorts, so the swarm would no longer be a mindless horde, but a disciplined killing machine. They were named Vortexians, for like a vortex, anything that was consumed by the horde would never be seen again. Even now, the Moon Lord was not done with the hive, for he saw potential in the hostility of the planet itself. He desired to harness the storms that raged in its atmosphere, and so it was that special suits were designed for some of the Vortexians that would allow them to travel deep into the ion storms, charging uniquely crafted weaponry that could channel the immense power of the storm. These members of the hierarchy were held in high regard as the strongest of them all, carrying with them the title of Storm Divers, a name that would come to strike fear into the Moon Lord's enemies. At last, the cosmic god had achieved all he could with this planet, gladly counting its inhabitants among his ever-growing army. There were still 2 worlds he had set his sights on though, and these were sure to be more of a challenge to subdue than even the great Elder God could fathom. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did want to support the channel, then please consider subscribing and hit that bell so that YouTube might possibly inform you when a new video comes out. If you want to go that bit further, please feel free to support the channel on Patreon or go and buy some merchandise on Spreadshirt and Teespring. Links are all down in the description. Other than that, have a great day and I'll see you next time.